Imagine a Navy SEAL team finds themselves surrounded by thousands of disciplined Roman legionnaires. Modern weaponry obliterates wave after wave, but the Romans don't stop. They adapt, they endure. How long can cutting-edge technology hold its ground against ancient military might? You're about to witness a clash of eras that'll leave you questioning history itself, but who survives when strategy and numbers collide? The SEAL team spots the Roman legion advancing across the battlefield, a solid wall of shields and spears stretching far into the distance. Even from their elevated position, the sheer number of soldiers looks overwhelming. Row after row of disciplined men moving as one, the glint of armor catching the sun. The SEALs are prepared for chaos, but this level of organization is something else entirely. Their leader calls out targets, and within seconds, the first shots are fired. The rapid crack of M4A1 carbines breaks the ancient silence. The impact is immediate. Tightly packed Roman soldiers at the front drop like stones, caught off guard by an enemy their senses can't detect. The Mk-48 machine gun lays down relentless suppressive fire, shredding shields and soldiers alike, while the Barrett M82 targets centurions shouting orders far from the front. Bodies pile up as the lethal precision of modern weaponry rips through the second line, then the third. Grenades arc into the tightly packed troops. The sound of detonations echoes like thunder. Chaos ripples through the ranks, but the Romans don't collapse. Where one soldier falls, another fills the gap almost immediately. Their iconic testudo formation, shields locked together overhead and in front, begins to form, closing the gaping holes left by the SEALs' assault. The SEALs' suppressive fire is unrelenting, a continuous storm of bullets and explosives that mows down entire clusters of men. Yet the Legion doesn't falter. The Mk-48 screams as it pours fire into the advancing ranks. These soldiers have been trained to endure anything. With unlimited ammo, the SEALs maintain their devastating barrage, but the Romans keep advancing, step by step, their numbers seemingly inexhaustible. The Romans, having no frame of reference for what they're facing, must think they're under attack by gods. Imagine sudden explosive firepower tearing through human and steel alike, and no one knows where it's coming from. One Roman might think it's Jupiter himself casting bolts of divine wrath. But despite the terror, their discipline holds. They don't scatter like common barbarians. Centurions bark commands, formations shift, and the legion marches on, closing the distance. Historically, the Romans never crumbled under fear. They stood firm against Carthaginian war elephants. They adapted to the nimble horse archers of the Parthians. Here, their response is the same: adapt or die. Even in confusion, the soldiers press forward, testing the limits of what they can endure. This unrelenting march becomes as much a psychological attack as the SEALs' ceaseless firepower. Unlike modern combat, where enemies can often be forced to retreat, the SEALs are facing an army trained to keep moving no matter the cost. And the Romans' sheer numbers and unity pose a growing threat. It's like watching a violent storm battering a dam. For now, the SEALs are holding back the tide with an unending torrent of firepower, but the Romans are a moving ecosystem with food, reinforcements, and layers of men ready to take the place of the fallen. The SEALs' infinite ammo ensures they can keep the pressure on, but the Legion's vast numbers and iron discipline mean the battle is far from decided. The Romans are grinding forward, adapting to the onslaught, and the SEALs must find a way to break their momentum. The SEALs knew they couldn't face the Roman legions head-on forever. After holding their position and inflicting heavy casualties, they retreated to higher ground, choosing a rocky hillside with dense foliage, terrain that would slow the Romans' tightly packed formations and provide visual cover for ambushes. Their tactics now depended on movement and surprise, the kind of warfare where they excelled. With unlimited supplies at their disposal, they planted C4 explosive charges along likely Roman paths and set up hidden sniper positions to control choke points. Their goal wasn't to destroy the entire legion, an impossible task, but to bleed it dry, soldier by soldier, until the Romans were forced to abandon the fight. The first ambush hit hard. A squad of Roman scouts, unaware of the danger above them, moved cautiously into the hillside. One sniper round was enough to ignite panic in the group, scattering the shields of men trained to rely on each other for survival. As they tried to regroup, a carefully timed C4 detonation ripped through their column, leaving bodies scattered and creating a break in the advancing Roman line. By the time reinforcements arrived, the SEALs had already shifted positions. It was classic asymmetric warfare. The SEALs moved like a scalpel, striking precise targets with unending firepower and explosives, disappearing before the enemy could return fire. But the Romans weren't just sitting ducks. They quickly showed why their legions had dominated the ancient world for centuries. After regrouping, they began organizing sweeps of the hillside, their shield formations now wider and flatter to protect against hidden explosives. Roman centurions directed ballistas toward the SEALs' suspected positions. These massive war machines, normally reserved for sieges, lobbed iron-tipped bolts at terrifying speeds, splintering trees and reducing rocky outcroppings to rubble. The SEALs now found their high ground becoming less defensible as the ballistas rained destruction down on their cover. It was clear that the Romans, despite being outpaced by modern technology, were adapting to a new kind of war. This wasn't the first time the Romans had faced an unfamiliar enemy and found ways to turn the tide. They had adjusted to the surprising mobility of Parthian cavalry, developed counter-strategies for Hannibal's war elephants, and absorbed new weapon designs from conquered territories. Here, their layered supply lines allowed them to keep their war machines functioning and their troops well-fed, while their unshakable discipline kept fear from breaking their formations. Even after suffering losses, the legion adapted, pressing forward with a sheer force of will and resources that slowly began to challenge the SEALs' relentless advantage. The SEALs attempted another ambush, their unlimited C4 and sniper rounds maintaining devastating precision. But they discovered just how quickly the Romans could execute a counterattack. The Romans' engineers began anticipating explosive placements, disarming several charges before they could detonate. The surprise of sniper shots diminished as Roman testudo formations closed gaps faster, using shields to protect exposed areas. The SEALs' tactics, so effective against uncoordinated guerrilla fighters in modern conflicts, were being neutralized by a force that turned cohesion into its greatest weapon. Every move the SEALs made now carried a cost. Their tactics required constant mobility, slipping from one position to the next before the Romans could encircle them. But mobility became harder as Roman scouts pushed deeper into the terrain, probing for weaknesses. While the SEALs' unlimited supplies ensured they could keep striking with unrelenting force, the Romans' vast supply lines and endless reinforcements allowed them to absorb losses and keep coming. The SEALs were surgical in their strikes, but the Romans were relentless, overwhelming the battlefield like a sledgehammer against stone. The challenge was becoming clear. Superior training, technology, and infinite supplies could win battles, but wars demanded more. The SEALs' unending firepower gave them a formidable edge, but they couldn't match the Romans' sheer numbers and endurance. Both sides were adapting, but the Romans' ability to reorganize, reinforce, and press forward threatened to test the limits of the SEALs' strategy. How long could precision outlast persistence? That answer might not be entirely up to them. The battle seemed to have reached a breaking point. The SEALs were holding their ground with devastating precision, but the Roman legion was adapting faster than expected, their vast numbers and iron discipline pressing closer despite heavy losses. The Romans' testudo formations, now tighter and more resilient, absorbed the SEAls' relentless assault while inching forward. Centurions barked orders, redirecting troops to exploit gaps in the terrain, their layered formations proving why Rome had dominated the ancient world. The SEAls' barrage of carbines, machine guns, and explosives tore through rank after rank, but the legion's unyielding resolve kept them advancing, a relentless tide of shields and spears. The Romans' adaptability was staggering. Their disciplined formations, once vulnerable to the SEAls' precision, now adjusted to minimize exposure, using wider, flatter shield walls to deflect sniper fire and absorb explosive blasts. Ballistas, repositioned to target the SEAls' elevated positions, lobbed iron-tipped bolts that splintered trees and shattered rocky outcroppings. The high ground, once a tactical advantage, was becoming a liability as the Romans' war machines and sheer numbers tightened the noose. It was like watching a massive bear, bloodied but unyielding, closing in on a cornered predator, dangerous and powerful, but relentless in its pursuit. The SEAls barely had time to process the tightening grip, but their training kicked in. With the Romans pressing forward, splitting their forces to encircle the hillside, the SEAls saw their window narrowing. Staying in place risked being overwhelmed by the legion's numbers, so their leader made the call to withdraw while maintaining pressure. A series of carefully timed explosions ripped through the Roman vanguard, shattering their advance and opening a narrow escape route. It wasn't a smooth getaway. The seals raced through a battlefield choked with chaos. Screams of wounded Romans, the clatter of shields, and the thunder of ballista bolts filled the air as they maneuvered their DPVs. Relying on speed and terrain familiarity, they stuck to rocky trails and high ground where the Roman infantry struggled to follow. Their sustained firepower kept the legion at bay, allowing the seals to widen the distance and vanish into the landscape. The Romans, for their part, weren't broken. Their discipline held firm, even as the seals' devastating strikes carved through their ranks. Historically, Rome had faced countless enemies: Gallic tribes, Carthaginian armies, Parthian horse archers, and emerged victorious through sheer endurance and adaptability. Here, they pressed forward despite catastrophic losses, their layered supply lines and endless reinforcements allowing them to absorb the punishment. The seals didn't need to defeat the entire legion. They just needed to escape its grasp, and their relentless tactics bought them that chance. Though the seals were now out of immediate danger, their position was far from secure. They were operating alone in an ancient world where they were seen as something unnatural, unknowable. The Romans weren't defeated, merely delayed, their vast numbers and unyielding resolve ensuring they would regroup and pursue. For now, the seals had escaped the battlefield, their superior tactics giving them the edge to break free. But survival in this new era was another challenge entirely. The odds were as grim as ever. The seals' escape attempt, though masterfully executed, was a fleeting victory against an enemy that refused to yield. The Romans, bloodied but unbroken, regrouped with terrifying efficiency, their centurions rallying the legion to pursue through the rocky trails. The seals' relentless strikes, explosions, and precision, fire tearing through pursuing cohorts, slowed the advance, but the legion's sheer numbers overwhelmed their efforts. As the seals navigated a narrow ravine, the Romans executed a devastating maneuver, splitting their forces to flank from both sides. Thousands of legionaries, shields locked and pila ready, closed in like a vice, their disciplined formations adapting to the terrain with brutal precision. The seals fought ferociously, their modern weapons cutting down waves of attackers, but the Romans' endless ranks absorbed each loss, pressing forward until the seals were pinned against a cliff face. Outmaneuvered and overwhelmed, the seals made their final stand, their firepower blazing until the last man fell under the weight of Rome's unyielding tide. The legion stood victorious, their endurance and unity proving that even the gods of war could not outlast the machine of Rome. The clash between the Navy SEALs and the Roman legion lays bare a timeless truth. Advanced technology can dominate a battlefield, but wars are won through endurance and unity. The SEALs' precision and relentless tactics carved through Roman ranks with devastating lethality, yet the legion's iron discipline and overwhelming numbers proved unbreakable. Adapting to every strike, Rome's unyielding machine absorbed catastrophic losses, outmaneuvering their modern foes with sheer resolve and tactical cohesion. In this clash of eras, the SEALs' technological brilliance burned brightly but briefly, overwhelmed by the legion's relentless tide. History bows not to the fire of innovation, but to the enduring strength of those who outlast all odds. What epic what-if world would you explore next? Share your ideas below. If you loved this video, smash that like button, subscribe for more mind-blowing alternate histories, and hit the bell. Our next adventure drops soon with another game-changing twist. Catch you in another world of the wildest what-ifs.